how you handle danger. Is there a special training that people like us receive? Once you reach the ground, how does a reporter's instinct kick in? How do you stay safe?
On the reporter's instinct, you have a better story when you and I went to Libya together. And that's one of the most horrifying experiences that you and I had when we entered Libya during that civil war. So I'll leave you to tell that story either today or another day to our viewers. That's a story that must be shared.
Today's about you guys.
So it's always about us, because reporters are always a team.
Absolutely.
The television network is always a team. I may be fronting the story, but you doing the work here, or our entire team is putting everything together. And we're the finest team in India today. Permit me to say that. But the moment I landed in Tel Aviv, it was Shabbat. So Shabbat it's like it's the country's in a virtual lockdown, and especially so close after the Iranian missile strike. No trains, no buses, no public transport. And here I am at the airport. Last time where we got our mobile phone SIM cards from the airport, that shop was shut for Shabbat. And it's a religious occasion which is followed to the T. Everything is in a lockdown. So I had to speak to some contacts to get a car that would take me to Haifa, which is about 100 kilometers away. And there was no car available. I couldn't even change money initially. Fortunately, I had some money from earlier, and that's the money I used just getting to Haifa. Then getting into a hotel. Again, your contacts always come in handy. And then getting hold of a car, because no driver initially was willing to go to that front line because rockets were falling every day. So you hire a car and then you drive yourself using only your mobile phone as GPS and your mobile phone as a translator.
Yes.
Because I don't understand Hebrew.
Correct.
I don't understand the signboards. Often they're only in Hebrew. So it's that Google translator and your mobile phone that gives you the directions 100 meters on. Take the third exit, and that's the way I got to the front line.
It's incredible. I mean, sometimes you're entirely by yourself. I have to say that when I joined Gaurav in Israel last year, he was doing everything himself. He was driving his own car, he was using his own GPS, and sometimes you really have to do that because that's sometimes the only option you have left. Ashu?
And no cameraman in such a
that's
situation
right.
at times.
India Today sends its journalists in without cameramen. We were doing our own work. Ashu and Gaurav have just spent weeks in Israel and Lebanon doing their own camera work, which is a completely different challenge altogether, which we may have to dedicate a separate episode to. But Ashu, Lebanon was the place where Israeli fury was focused for the last few weeks that you've been reporting from there. In Israel, there are bunkers, there are, rocket shelters. Things are very, very organized. But it was quite different from what we saw from your coverage. It was very, very different. It's not that organized. There are not that many hiding places. There are no warnings and sirens.
Nothing.
I don't know. How did you prepare for that kind of thing? Was there anyone to guide you?
So I had to hire a local driver, at least who could understand basic English, and rest I said, as Gaurav said, translation through Google.
Yeah.
And that was literally a time-consuming thing. So there was not only threat of missile attack by Israeli Air Force, because it was told in Lebanon all over that to eliminate one enemy, Israel will strike down entire apartment. And at least on 2 occasions, we were in a downtown area, living in a hotel. The entire hotel, the glasses were vibrating. The hotel manager came, how are you going to survive this? If you want to vacate, you can evacuate, you can vacate the hotel, we will refund you back. So that was a basic training essentially, that we got down from the bed, offside of the bed, literally covered ourselves in a blanket. If the sharpnels or by any chance some damage to the glass, it will not hurt us. That was another threat was, because there is no air siren alarm system.
Yeah.
Throughout the day, multiple occasions, we could hear the drones, Israeli drones hovering over us. Third, the biggest threat was getting arrested by Hezbollah. Literally, at least 3 point of occasions when I got detained by Hezbollah. First, you're traveling here without permission. You need to have the information department parallelly run by Hezbollah. The Hezbollah is part of the government.
Yeah.
So if you shoot anywhere, you record yourself, they will come all of a sudden, and you feel like whether you're being abducted or being detained.
And it happened to Gaurav?
And they'll keep you for an hour. They'll check all your videos. At one point of time, I realized the place when somehow I got to know that was Hezbollah commander's house, which was demolished literally in a strike. It was turned into rubble. I started recording video. 3 people came. They called themselves civil volunteers, civil defense. They had walkie-talkie. Within a minute, I realized they are the Hezbollah people. Again, I got detained for 3-4 hours. They're totally, so that's a different level of fear. Plus, the people are not very cooperative.
Yeah.
There is a one belief that India at large sides with Israel, so there was some anti-India sentiments. And you also talk about the drama the other few journalists did, all about things. So the unprofessional approach by a few journalists landed us in a trouble.
Through your coverage as war reporters, even though we are the faces of the stories, and the both of you were more watched than any other journalists who were in Israel and Lebanon, the stories are through the voices and the experiences of the people. And it's incredible how you meet some of the finest people in war zones, the most generous people in war zones. You were talking about the driver, Gaurav, you were talking about the friends you made in the, in the northern part of Israel. How does that work? You know, for a reporter from a foreign land being in a dangerous country, how is it that you're able to make those contacts and friends so easily? Are the people on the ground grateful that their story is being told?
Well, the situation in Lebanon was very different.
Yeah.
They did not want to be heard. They wanted the Western media more to cover on how Israel is attacking Lebanon, how the civilians are being injured. But there are certain concern and apprehensions with regards to Asian media at large. So they did not want us to go because many Syrians were arrested. There was suspicion that perhaps they are working for the Israeli intelligence. And there was similar apprehensions about us that perhaps these people are reporting about certain locations and Israel would geolocate those locations and perhaps more strike down. So that was potentially even threat while going and reporting. So yes, the source, the primary source of information was getting in touch with Hezbollah, connecting to their Telegram or social media network where they officially release data because they are fighting, and in their perspective, you see, they are fighting their own battle. So they wanted to give you video, they wanted to give their statements, everything was coming officially. But we going on the ground, because a lot of things, their commanders are being killed, they did not want those things to come in a way that was originally. So they were literally, blockade for us to going certain places. When we initially hired the first driver, he was not much resourceful. So that was the one reason when I got detained for hours by the Hezbollah group. It took a lot of time to convince them, translating words, getting them our credentials checked, our ID cards, phone that we have recorded, anything. So on those terms, in a couple of days, it took to us reach out to us. Someone really credible, who's resourceful, who could take a stand for us, who understands our language, and also resourceful on the other side.
Yeah.
Because there are, besides those challenges, I said, sleeping in the hotel, all of a sudden you hear the bombing, loud explosions. More importantly, to go to those areas. For example, there was a threat when we were, I decided to go to Mediterranean. We heard that Israel will now escalate offensive through the Mediterranean coastal line. So we decided, let's go to the Mediterranean. If the fishermen are out, let's see how it looks like. We started traveling in nearly maybe 4 or 5 nautical miles. We went, and then we could see something like a landscape which looks like there is some deployment.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden we started firing. My fisherman was so scared. I cannot wait here for a second. And he just took U-turn and we had to come back.
Yeah.
So there are people who are helpful. I mean, the fisherman, he took a risk to taking us all the way from Beirut to the Tyre, the Mediterranean line, which was near the Awali River. But then there are people who were ready to take, of course, the huge money at the cost of huge money. But there were people who were very cooperative for like those hotel guys, giving us shelter. You want to evacuate, we will refund you. You want to take other side, please go. There could be potentially threat.
Correct.
And even when certain people were coming to the hotel inquiring about us, who are those people doing live outside from these hotel. So all of these, there were good people, there were good human beings, good souls helping.
There are always good people in war zones. It's one of those elements of field magic, as I call it.
And I would like to thank especially Adam, my driver, who was literally like an angel.
They become
for
lifelong
8-9
friends.
days.
Yeah.
They all the time, every time I get out, no, wear your jacket first. If we are going, wear your jacket first. Then he was speaking when we were in a Tyre city, near the Tyre city. I was speaking to certain Hezbollah people. They heard there is drones coming up, and the moment they see gathering of 4 or 5, they will immediately strike, because that's what the den of Hezbollah. There's that rush from anywhere, and it was barely 8 to 9 minutes we heard the loud explosion.
The people like us and people like you guys travel to these war zones, spend a few weeks or months there, and then still get to come back home, to the safety of India. But the people we meet in those war zones become lifelong friends. And Gaurav, you interacted with so many young Israelis, who are in the military, 19, 20-year-olds who are going into operations. On the day that we are recording this, Yahya Sinwar's story is the big headline, and we understand that the soldiers who finally made him meet his end were all 19, 20-year-old trainee commandos. So what was it like interacting with them? They also have a future in a country where there doesn't seem to be a solution or an end to this conflict.
And they're very aware of it. But, they're fighting a battle of existence. They're fighting a battle for survival. So when you fight a battle for your survival, your instincts are very different. You also know how to identify friend from foe. So, and in this interconnected world, they instantly check your antecedents. So they immediately go, what's your Instagram account? What's your Twitter account? What have you been writing? What's your station like? And the moment they would see our station, like in Israel, word of mouth was so quick that here is somebody whose station has 67 million subscribers on YouTube or 20 million subscribers on YouTube, English and Hindi. So, 1 billion strong people are watching. So they would seek you out. They would help you. And India Today is a very well respected channel, a very well watched channel across the region. Local friends I made there, they got me a lot of access to the IDF, to the police, to the mayor of Haifa, to other officials, to a former minister, to current members of parliament, and to soldiers on ground. So, through local journalists, for example, they're instantly very, very friendly and helpful. This photographer I met, Lenny, he had shot the 2006 war with Lebanon, and he was shooting the 2024 war, and he was chronicling both. So when he would go to the front lines, I would go along with him, and that's one advantage. He knew the language. He would tell me where it's safe to go, where it's not safe to go. One advantage there. Other foreign journalists, for example, Greeks are covering the story in a very big way. So a group of Greek journalists, they were in their car, I was in mine, and we would travel in a convoy. That's also safer at times, especially post-sundown when you're returning. You'd rather be in a convoy than be alone.
Correct.
And that convoy saved our life, as you and I saw this both in Israel and in Libya.
What I can say for sure about both Ashu and Gaurav is that they are back, but the war is not over. The war continues. The both of them, believe me, are constantly on standby to return. Maybe the three of us will go back at some point of time. But I do want to end by saying that even though reporters like us wish to report stories, wish to be in conflict zones, wish to tell the big story of the world, I can safely speak on behalf of both Ashu and Gaurav that we do not wish for war. We do not wish for conflict, because war, as the three of us and many others have seen, is an absolutely terrible, terrible business. It is replete with suffering. It leaves lifelong scars, and it basically means that humans cannot get along and work out their problems. War is a terrible thing, and the only real security for a world is a world without war. But until then, we will be there to report it. Thank you so much for watching.
Just look around. This is a residential area. Right in the center of this residential area, a rocket struck.
खतरा इतना ज़्यादा है कि कभी भी यहाँ दोबारा हमला हो सकता है.
This is a kindergarten. In a kindergarten, these are Israeli security forces personnel collecting the shrapnel of the Hezbollah rocket that fell.
Strike and destroyed this entire apartment. All you see right behind me.
If Israel is scared, everyone you see has a thumbs up sign. You talk to everyone and they have a smile on their faces. They're saying we are not scared.
One of the worst humanitarian crises. Barely few meters right behind me is the Syrian border. So this is the no man's land.
ये जो फूट यहाँ पर पड़ा है, ये कल यहाँ रॉकेट अटैक हुआ था. हाइफा के ऊपर रॉकेट अटैक हुआ है हमास हिजबुल्लाह का, और हिजबुल्लाह के इस रॉकेट अटैक के बाद आयरन डोम सिस्टम पूरी तरह से कि इसको मैं आपको और पास से दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं।
Hours after a major missile strike by Iran on Israel on October the 1st, where over 180 missiles were fired into the Jewish state, India today deployed its reporters to the ground to report firsthand on the aftermath of the biggest escalation in the Israel-Hamas-Iran-Lebanon crisis so far. And two of those reporters, among India's finest, have just returned from the front lines, from the war zone, and by very popular demand, we're putting together this show called The War Diaries with my very valued friends and colleagues, Gaurav Sawant, who's just returned from the northern front of Israel, and Ashutosh Mishra, who was in Lebanon, which has seen the brunt of Israeli airstrikes over the last few weeks. Ashu and Gaurav, good to see you back. The reason we've put this show together, gentlemen, is not because of what is happening in Israel and Lebanon. That we are covering extensively. The both of you have been telling your stories. Some of the most watched journalism in the country has been by Gaurav and Ashu. But our viewers have reached out to us and said, we want to know what it's like to be a war reporter. We want to know how war reporters have the courage to go to dangerous places. Why do companies send their employees into these dangerous places? And I wanted to get it straight from you guys. I was there last year as well. But we are never asked to go. We volunteer to go. Isn't that true? I want to first get that from you, Gaurav. You've always wanted to go to these war zones.
In fact, in the newsroom, there's almost a fight who will go.
Yeah.
And you have to stake claim and you have to tell the company why you need to go and not Shiv or not Ashutosh. That's the way it is in our newsroom, because everyone wants to report the biggest story that's happening. You know, whether it was getting there last year, Ashutosh and I were amongst the first journalists to get there on the 8th of October. 7th of October, the terror attack took place, the worst in Israel's history. 8th of October, Ashutosh and I were in Israel, and then you followed us, within a week. It was terrible that time. If I may just, go into history just a bit, when he and I reached Ashkelon and Sidrot, the Hamas terrorists were still inside. They were still firing. The moment we landed, we hadn't even worn our bulletproof jackets, and the shelling started. So those rockets started coming in, and the Iron Dome was taking them down. It's almost like an airburst. And for benefit of our viewers, airburst is like an explosive that explodes mid-air.
Yeah.
And you have thousands of shrapnel, red-hot pieces of iron that fall to the ground. If it falls in your head, you're dead. If it falls on your arm is blown off. If it falls on your chest, the back, you're practically dead, or God forbid, maimed for life. But we were able to survive, rush into a shelter. It's often said, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. But here it's usually reporters rush in to tell the biggest story.
And, I'm going to come to the, the dangerous part of it in just a moment. But, journalists are never the news. And it is nobody's case that journalists should make themselves the news. But, given that we are the faces of this story when it comes to India Today's audience, there is a great deal of curiosity about how this happens. So I want to ask you one thing, Ashu. You have a young family. How do they allow you to go to these dangerous places?
Well, first, at least a few hours before my departure, they were not aware with it that I'm planning to go to Lebanon. Because last year I have been to Israel. I have seen their capabilities when it comes to striking against Hamas or Hezbollah. But this time, the more developing scene was in Lebanon, because at large, there is one of the most powerful militia, the Shiite militia in Hezbollah, in Lebanon. But in the northern part, it remains the Sunni-dominated Lebanon, largely the civilians who are not part of Hezbollah or for that matter, any militia group, and largely which was called the Paris of Midis. So that was more curiosity that how Israel is going to fight the most powerful militia this time. And this is, of course, going to be one of the worst humanitarian crises in the history of Lebanon. So I was more excited that this is the story, that there will be more concerning situation, and perhaps the world need to know how this is developing, how the Hezbollah is going to fight against Israel, how the Israel is going to retaliate, because ultimately the people will be caught in the crossfire. So when I planned it, when I got this approval, they'll have to go Lebanon. I applied for the visa. My family, till I got the visa, they were not aware about it, that I'm going to Lebanon. So the moment that I told them, I think I'll have to be leaving by tomorrow early morning, and I'm prepared for this. They were shocked again, because this was a similar situation like last year when they got to know that I'm going to Israel, and there was why. So the first question from my daughter and my wife, why? And I asked my daughter, okay, maybe during the transit I'll be coming via Abu Dhabi or Dubai. What chocolate you want? Well, we don't want you to go. We don't want a chocolate.
No, because I can tell you one thing. In our story right now, as we hear these very personal stories from these two war reporters, I want to say that there is always an effort to humanize what we see. When we go there onto the ground, there is always an effort to tell the stories through human eyes. There is so much suffering that one actually sees over there. And there is always the real risk of danger. You know, please forgive me for saying this, but the media at large, both in India and abroad, a lot of nautanki happens in these places. A lot of people play around, you know, lie about where they actually are. And I'm very proud to say that India today has never done that. We actually were in difficult and dangerous places reporting, Gaurav. We saw you, in northern Israel in the front with Lebanon as well. Our viewers want to know how you handle danger. Is there a special training that people like us receive? Once you reach the ground, how does a reporter's instinct kick in? How do you stay safe?
You know, on the reporter's instinct, you have a better story when you and I went to Libya together. And that's one of the most horrifying experiences that you and I had when we entered Libya during that civil war. So I'll leave you to tell that story either today or another day to our viewers. That's a story that must be shared.
Today's about you guys.
So it's always about us, because reporters are always a team.
Absolutely.
The television network is always a team. I may be fronting the story, but you doing the work here, or our entire team is putting everything together, and we're the finest team in India today. Permit me to say that. But the moment I landed in Tel Aviv, it was Shabbat. So Shabbat it's like it's the country's in a virtual lockdown, and especially so close after the Iranian missile strike. No trains, no buses, no public transport. And here I am at the airport. Last time where we got our mobile phone SIM cards from the airport, that shop was shut for Shabbat. And it's a religious occasion which is followed to the T. Everything is in a lockdown. So I had to speak to some contacts to get a car that would take me to Haifa, which is about 100 kilometers away. And there was no car available. I couldn't even